This time on Poll Hub, what a week it's been! And it's only Monday as we record this. We are looking at the post-debate polls and brand new Supreme Court rulings. A lot to talk about on both. Then July 4th this week is a day to celebrate America. And we've polled Americans about some aspects of that, and we've gotten some very interesting answers. We'll look at that. And stay tuned for the fun fact. It is very on theme. We expect that Lee will make a smooth transition into this one. And hi, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm J.D. Dapper.
I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Marengoff.
It is July 1st as we record this, Monday, July 1st, and we're recording just about an hour after the Supreme Court released its final ruling of this term, and it was the big one. It was our president's immune from prosecution, or otherwise known as, can a president order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival and have immunity? And the answer seems to be maybe. Based on what the court ruled. We are not legal experts, but we will talk about that. The other thing that we want to talk about is the post-debate polls, the post-debacle debate polls. Joe Biden had a very rough time, despite spending a lot of prep time leading up to it. He had a very rough time in his debate, and the polls that have come out since seem to suggest that Americans did think he stunk the place up and didn't do a very good job. And Americans, a majority of them, don't particularly think that Donald Trump did a great job either, although they think he did a better job. The question is, does it change anything? Does it change anything in terms of, will Joe Biden stay in the race? Does it change anything in terms of what Americans think about when they say who they're going to vote for in November? So, Lee, not much to talk about. I guess we can just end the segment.
Yes, we know the debate is done and over. We are beginning to understand a little bit about it, but maybe we should just talk a little bit about our reactions to the immunity decision. Obviously, there's no polling since the decision. As we are talking.
Come on, Lee. It's been an hour. I mean, there's no polling.
Somebody's polling.
How can that be?
Okay.
Somebody's probably polling. Yeah.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I can sort of read numbers. And if 6 people on the court say one thing and 3 people on the court say the other thing, I think the 6 won. And those tend to be the conservative members of the court, which suggests to me that at least on the face of it, the conservative part of the court has dominated this in terms of absolute immunity for things the president has done while he or she was in office, no immunity if it was outside the official area, and then something called presumptive immunity, which I thought I didn't understand because I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is it's not clearly defined if you look at some of the minority rulings, so we don't know the gray matter, maybe where all this ends up, and the gray matter covers a lot of the ground, apparently. So I don't know.
Gray matter? I mean, yes, I think we should give a lot of thought for this. Yes, we are not lawyers, and we don't even like to play one on TV. But I think that there is now a new legal term called presumptive immunity. And my understanding is that simply means that the courts are going to have a lot of power and be making a lot of decisions to determine what, in fact, constitutes that term. Jay, I know you've been diving into the briefs. It hasn't been that long, but your thoughts?
I mean, so I think of this in political terms, and what does this mean for the election? Because none of us are lawyers, and it's interesting reading all this, and it makes me maybe wish I would have been a lawyer sometimes, but that was my choice. I think that this will add to the sense among Democrats that this is a end of democracy election and that that's not histrionics. And I think that it will add to the enthusiasm in MAGA for their love of Donald Trump.
Well, wait, explain a little bit more about those things. So how do you see it mobilizing Democrats in the end of democracy?
Yeah, the 2 dissents from Sotomayor and Jackson are, at least in my cursory reading of it, but also in some of the traffic in social media right now among legal experts who don't generally have a dog in one camp or the other, are historic and likely to be the types of things people read in history books in the future because of the stakes, the way they frame the stakes of what the court has decided in this case. Whether that's accurate or not, I think that's a narrative that Democrats going to be reading, and it supports what they already believe is that Donald Trump is a significant and historic risk to democracy as we know it and a move towards autocracy.
In fact, when we're looking at number one issues facing the country, Democrats are actually most likely to believe that democracy is at stake. And it is the top issue among Democrats as they're going to be going to the polls, at least right now in November.
Right. And I think this just puts that on 10. I think this is a jet fuel for that perception because the court ruled that a president does have immunity for official acts and has some, as you suggested, some limited immunity, presumptive immunity in some other cases. It all comes back to the courts to decide. And if you say, well, this court has decided in favor of, Republicans and conservatives in almost every case, the majority, then, 1 + 1 = 2. In terms of the Republicans, though, I do think that this has the motivating effect for MAGA because it reinforces their belief that Donald Trump is being persecuted for political reasons. And I think this reinforces that. So I think we have reinforced narratives that already exist. And I think the thing to watch in polling, because this ruling can be construed to be very simple. Donald Trump or a president can get away with murder, but it can also be construed to be very nuanced in these 3 levels of presumptive immunity that a president can have. So I think this narrative is going to be very interesting to watch in the polls in the coming weeks, is to see whether what happened in the court today further moves people in directions I think they've already been moving.
Yeah, and I would just finally put on this is that they are clearly in this decision and in other decisions altering the balance of power between the 3 branches. It seems that Congress is not in the position now to definitively make all the laws because it's going to come down to the courts judging for themselves what constitutes things like presumptive immunity. So, and that shifts the ultimate balance of power. And that's probably the most radical thing of it. But Barb, you were going to get the last word in.
No. I was actually going to head back to the debate.
Oh, okay.
So thank you, Lee, for making that point, because I was going to head towards something else that we're going to be looking for in the polls, and maybe we just start there. There has been some polling right after the debate last Thursday, over the weekend, most of it showing that people noticed that President Biden had a lot of difficulty. Words such as unintelligible, incoherent, ghastly, ghostly, all sorts of negative descriptions of his performance. And also, I might add, of Trump's performance in terms of the fact-checking side of things, which CNN was not able to do during the debate, or at least the reporters were not, as part of the rules, were not allowed to be doing the debate. But I think one of the things that I find fascinating, despite the fact that more people did think that Trump won the debate, and on a lot of issues believe that Trump did well, what we see in the polling, just in terms of the toss-up, is it seems that everything is really still baked in. And I know the media kind of went apoplectic about Biden's performance, and many were calling for him to resign from running for re-election. But what do you expect to see in the coming polls, and what should we be looking for when, because I'm assuming, not us, but I'm assuming quite a number of polls, as well as those that are being done by the Republicans and Democrats, will be filling the airwaves and social media in the days and weeks to come.
I think that the Joe Biden, look, going into the debate, what you didn't want to be was to be the object of all the conversation after the debate. So Joe Biden clearly became the talking point, and that was not a good thing for him. Ironically, though, that when it comes to potential movement in the numbers, I think the debate made the Donald Trump base more solid for him and the Joe Biden voters more anti-Trump, making Joe Biden's performance not quite as relevant. And I think also, look at the swing voters. We know that there's the ones who are going to decide the election in key states. I'm not sure the swing voters move, with the exception of one group who's been getting a lot of ink, and that is black voters. I think one of the takeaways I've seen a lot of is Donald Trump's line about black jobs and Hispanic jobs. And there's been a lot on social media about, well, what did he really mean by black jobs? And does that reflect some kind of underlying racist view? Blacks have been teetering, some of them. I think this may bring them back into the Democratic fold. If I see one thing I would expect, it would be movement with those voters. They couldn't have been happy with that phrase.
So in terms of the polling, CBS YouGov has the most recent data out. They released it on Sunday. And I think that also has, look, what do they call the White House Correspondents' Dinner? The Geek Prom. So there's the Politorati, which is what they used to be called, but you could also call them the Geek Prom Squad. And that is the group of people for whom politics is sports. It's everything. And I think what we've seen here in this polling from CBS YouGov kind of supports this notion that the people who watched the debate, and it had fairly low ratings, but comparatively, half the ratings, for instance, of the first Clinton-Trump debate in 2016. But the people who really focus on this are not necessarily representative of where most Americans are, who maybe didn't watch, maybe watched a little, maybe only got 10 minutes in and said, I'm done, and mainly have seen, the things on social media or heard people talking about it. Saturday Night Live is not on. They're in summer break, so we don't get the benefit of a Saturday Night Live cold open that would be probably pretty devastating to Biden. But I think what's interesting in those CBS News numbers to me is that the majority of Americans don't think Trump should be running, and the majority don't think Biden should be running. These are two historically unpopular candidates, and this reinforced the notion that I think among many Americans that if we could change anything, neither one of them would be running. A majority of Americans don't want either one of them to be running. And I think the debate reinforced that in this polling that we're seeing. And that's my takeaway, other than this is probably now the most famous presidential debate in American history. Good old Richard Nixon, nobody's going to remember him sweating anymore.
Although us old folks will still probably refer to it.
I'll say one final thing on this. Joe, you have to worry not only about what candidates do, but their handlers. And I think that the agreements that the Biden team made about the rules of this debate were so misguided. They thought that by shutting the mic off, that Donald Trump was going to be screaming over a dead mic. He didn't do that. The optics were horrible. I'm not sure what they thought Joe Biden was going to do. He looked bad. The makeup was bad. The camera angles were bad. I know optics, everybody's saying, well, it's the substance. But, optics obviously
No, it's
count.
not.
So hang on, guys. So hang on.
Debates have nothing to do with substance. I covered debates, many, many, many debates. And I tried to cover the substance of them, but at the end of the day, the thing that you do in stories about the debate is, did one win or the other win? And what was the performance? The performative aspect is what this is all about. And the performance was deadly.
Let me circle back. Let me circle back to the beginning. Did the Supreme Court just do Joe Biden a favor?
Oh, yeah. Just like they did when they ruled the abortion ruling.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's why the arguments that, he should step down, gosh, that wouldn't be pretty. Think of an open convention and thinking of a circular firing squad. I mean, that would just not be pretty at all. But that, I think, is, gosh, those are two topics I suspect we're not done talking about. And you want to talk about next debate between the two of them? That'll have ratings, I think. People like car wrecks. So we'll see.
Well, there is a little more going on this week, which I think most Americans actually will be paying close attention to. And that is July 4th. It's a national holiday. Many of us are lucky enough to have that day off. I know there are others who don't have that opportunity, but we will be certainly firing up the grill and eating plenty of, real and fake hot dogs on that day and watching fireworks. At least I will be at Yankee Stadium the night before. But it does bring up, some thoughts about patriotism, how people do think about the U.S. Have we maintained that sense of patriotism and connection to country and government as we have in the past? Of course, that's something we poll about. We actually asked directly whether people feel that Americans are more or less patriotic than they have been in the past. And interestingly, or perhaps not surprisingly, I should say, a majority of Americans think people in the U.S. are less patriotic than they were a few years ago. 32% believe they are about as patriotic as they were. And 14% believe they're actually more patriotic. And interestingly, Americans under the age of 30, 1 in 5, are more likely than their older counterparts to believe people in the U.S. are more patriotic. So perhaps it's the idealism of youth, but have we had a major change in terms of how Americans feel this country stands in the world?
I react to the flag and this data in a way that I think that the flag, although we may be seeing young people being more patriotic, I think on the whole, the flag has become much more politicized. And, in a sense.
So our symbols as a country, you're seeing as much more politicized.
So it's not too long ago that the quarterback Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem, and that was seen as a big deal, and finished his career. We had a Supreme Court justice's wife flying the flag upside down, and that brought a reaction. I mean, I think symbolically the flag is now front and center to how people are reacting politically to things, and the flag has become part of that, no pun intended, political football, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that patriotism is wrapped in symbols, but it's also wrapped in how you feel about what we've talked about in the last segment, right? That what's happening in the country, people feel is tied to patriotism in many ways. And I think patriotism and the flag in particular have been kind of, at various times, been kind of taken, by one political movement or another. And this goes back, long throughout our history. I think it is interesting that in our poll, we found that 74% of Americans are proud to display an American flag in their home. Yet a July 2023 YouGov survey found 22% of Americans fly their flag at home every day. So I do think it's a little bit of a lot of talk, all hat and no cattle. Is that what John Sparks would call it? A lot of talk and not as much action. I think slapping a bumper sticker on your car of the flag, I just don't think that says anything about your patriotism level. And I think that's a little bit what we see in these polls is the ambiguity in it, is that patriotism and the symbols are a little disassociated from, I think, the reality.
And to your point, Jay, I think when you say that it is taken up by one side or the other, Republicans are most likely to be proud to display an American flag. That doesn't mean that, the large proportion of independents and Democrats don't feel that way. But they certainly stand out with 9 and 10. And also, both Republicans and independents are more likely than Democrats to say that U.S. patriotism is on the decline. So there's this very strong feeling for the symbols of the country, but then also this pessimism that somehow we are not on the right track.
And that's why burning the flag is, disliked. But I tell you, when it comes to symbolism, I can't get past that people are divided over the attack on the Capitol, because I'm figuring one way or another, if you're using the American flag to break down the windows to get into the Capitol, that's not good symbolically. And yet a lot of the country has a totally different interpretation of what went on January 6th. I usually believe my own eyes on things like that. So this is it sounds like a, pretty know-nothing topic, but obviously it is something that is, it's there, and it's part of our political arsenal of arguments right now.
Well, this has been a pretty heavy discussion about American democracy. So perhaps we land and end this July 4th with something more lighthearted. Lee, what did you have in mind?
Well, a lighthearted question that I don't agree with the results on. So the question was, YouGov surveyed Americans, and they asked, what nickname do you most prefer for the American flag? And the first one was Stars and Stripes at 31%, the red, white, and blue at 16%, the Star Spangled Banner at 12%. I'm sorry, I skipped Old Glory at 18%, which finished second. I will say that when it comes to nicknames, I think Old Glory is the nickname. I mean, I don't think, would you call the Stars and Stripes anything? That's what it is. It's the flag or Stars and Stripes. Maybe I'm being too literal.
Well, I thought that the 25% who said none of the above and not sure, I guess I'm in that category, is I just call it the flag. I mean, I don't really think about it as, I know it has a nickname, and there's a song, I think, for every one of these.
Let me ask just a question. I'd like to bring in our student producers, the lady in Athens. Have you actually heard the flag referred to in each of these ways?
I think so, yeah, for sure. Definitely more frequently with the top categories, but I've definitely heard each of these.
Okay. I didn't know if one of them, any of them had harkened back to perhaps an earlier generation. Old Glory, Lee.
Oh, not New Glory. I get it. I get it. Athen, where do you come down on this?
I actually haven't really heard any of these. I think I've only heard Stars and Stripes. I don't think I've heard the rest of them be used. That's the only one that I really recognize.
I know that when Senator Moynihan spoke at a program, former Senator Moynihan, obviously, when he spoke at a program that my wife was running for development disabled children, he brought a flag that had flown over the Capitol. And we have that. And I kind of think that's a cool thing to have in your house. I don't have a flagpole, so I can't do anything about waving it. But I like having that around. It gives me a sense of added patriotism, even if it isn't a nickname. But Barb, you were saying something about Old Glory. Yeah, Old Glory, and you thought you were going to get me on that one. You went ageist on me.
Well, I just didn't know whether there were generational terms of, ways of addressing or thinking about or talking about the American flag, because I do refer to it as the American flag. And as Jay pointed out, many of these I actually think of as songs rather than the flag. Like, I must say, I see the Star Spangled Banner as our anthem. And when thinking about it, I recognize that it is the flag, but I don't think I have ever referred to the American flag as the Star Spangled Banner, except when singing the national anthem.
But you do like the piccolos on July 4th.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
But Boston Pops and elsewhere.
Stars and Stripes forever.
That'll do it for Poll Hub this week.
Poll Hub is produced by the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer. Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
The Poll Hub team includes Athen Hollis, Delaney Hayes, and Hunter Petro.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, consider telling a friend about us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy, our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them at us at Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it'll cooperate.
And finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you
In your podcasting app as soon as it's released.
We'll see you next time.